From MTN News, this is the race for U.S. House.
Hello and welcome to today's U.S. House debate here on the Montana Television Network. Well, the 2020 election is closer than any of us may want to think. It is now just 38 days away. In fact, the ballots get mailed out to all registered voters in Montana in just 2 weeks on the 9th of October. Tonight, we are focused on the race for Montana's U.S. House seat. It is Montana's at-large congressional district. In fact, it is the largest district in the United States by population with over 1 million constituents. It is an open seat for this election as incumbent Congressman Greg Gianforte is currently running for Montana governor. The salary for the congressman from Montana is $174,000 a year. Let's meet the candidates.
Kathleen Williams is a former three-term state legislator from Bozeman who has a nearly 4-decade career in natural resources planning and policy. She most recently worked as Associate Director of the Western Landowners Alliance. In her 6 years at the Montana legislature, she passed bills that created hundreds of new small businesses, required insurers to stop denying care to cancer patients, and protected Montana's businesses from being sued for not making decisions only to maximize profit. She ran for this seat in 2018, losing to incumbent Republican Greg Gianforte. Williams lives on the east edge of Bozeman with her German wire-haired foreigner, Danny. Matt Rosendale is the current state auditor and former state legislator from Glendive. He ran for the U.S. Senate in 2018, losing to incumbent Democrat John Tester. He has worked in real estate, both in Montana and elsewhere, and has resided in Glendive since 2002. As state auditor, Rosendale has cut the office's operating costs and refused a pay raise when other elected officials accepted one. He has also worked to lower healthcare costs by expanding insurance choices for Montanans and worked to pass a bill that sought to lower prescription drug costs by restricting certain pricing practices by benefit managers. As a member of the State Land Board, he also expanded access to over 46,000 acres of public land. He and his wife Jean have 3 sons.
Time now to go over the simple rules for today's debate. The candidate that is being questioned will be given 60 seconds to reply. The other candidate will then have a 30-second rebuttal, and the first candidate that was questioned will have 30 seconds to respond. We're asking the candidates to please stay within those time constraints. We'll get as many questions in as possible. Each candidate will also be afforded a 90-second time frame for a closing statement. Let's take a look at our panelists joining us today for ask questions of our candidates. We have Mike Dennison, the chief political reporter for the Montana Television Network. Also, Jill Valley is with us this morning, anchor reporter with KPAX-TV in Missoula. And I'm Jay Cohn, anchor emeritus at KTVQ in Billings. Now, prior to our debate today, we had a drawing to determine which candidate would go first. Mr. Rosendale, that honor goes to you. And as the moderator, I get to pose our first question today. So our first topic is the pandemic as our country tries to rebound from this worldwide pandemic. Plenty of discussion now in Congress, Mr. Rosendale, about the need for yet another stimulus package. Our question is, would you support a new stimulus package? What would you want to see in it? And should it include more unemployment insurance for those Americans who have been put out of work during this COVID-19 outbreak?
Thank you so much for the question, Jay, and MTN for putting this debate on this evening. I put together a 8-part plan that I would like to implement once I arrive in Congress, and it covers a vast scope of things that we need to do to get our economy growing again. Much of that is reducing the regulations, many of which we've seen relaxed during this COVID situation that we can make permanent. It talks about reducing taxation, which my opponent would like to immediately increase if she was to arrive in Congress. And it talks about utilizing our resources. When it comes to the unemployment benefits, I think that they have been a very valuable part of the plan that has been utilized so far because people are suffering and it's not at their own fault. But we cannot raise those limits to where they're paid higher to stay at home than they are to actually return back to work again.
Ms. Williams, your response.
Yeah, so we needed a strategic approach to this pandemic from the beginning. one of the frustrations of not being in the office right now is I had to provide my leadership from the sidelines, and we were calling for strategic partnerships on testing from the very beginning. So we do need another relief package. We need continuity for people. We need to make sure that the states can implement it. And I'm ready to go to Congress and be that leader in a crisis that will help us all get out of this together.
Mr. Rosendale, 30 seconds for your final response.
I'm really pleased at the things that we were able to get done during the pandemic. We made sure that all testing was covered for all people across our state that needed it without any cost to them whatsoever, and made sure that it was available in areas across the state. And then again, we're able to work between the directives that the president handed down and the governor handed down to relax some of the HIPAA guidelines so that we could utilize things like telemedicine to make sure that everyone was able to get health care in a good, affordable fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. This next question goes to Ms. Williams. Now, if Congress were to go ahead and pass a second stimulus bill, what kinds of things would you like to see for Montana small businesses? They got a little help with the CARES Act initially, but a lot of them are still struggling. What would you like to see given to them so they can help recover from this?
Well, as I talk to businesses, and really my campaign has always been about traveling across the state, talking to as many people as possible to see what their hopes, struggles, and dreams are, because that's, to me, is how a true representative functions, is representing all of Montana and knowing what the issues are. So many businesses have told me that they would like to see a renewal in the PPP program. That has been a lifeline for many. One of the things I was calling for early on is, and still am, is more transparency in where those major expenditures are going from the federal government. I was raised by Depression-era parents, and I want to make sure we're keeping a tight fist on the checkbook. So we need to make sure that I think PPP can be renewed. I think we need to make sure that the Postal Service has the opportunity to stay in business, and we need to ensure that people have continuity in their employment.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Rosendale, your rebuttal.
So I brought together a roundtable of business leaders from around the state more than 30 days ago before we put together our business plan. And basically they said that one of the things they would like is for the governor to release some of those funds that he's sitting on right now. He has like $900 million that have not been distributed back into the communities that are really in dire need of them. So they would like to see that. And again, we've got many of the other parts of our plan are posted on my website that folks can see.
Ms. Williams, your response?
Yeah, so my opponent talks about his plan. If you look at that plan, a majority of it is really off the shelf of his DC dark money backers in DC. And you know, I wrote my own plan. I helped Montana get out of a crisis when we were trying to pull out of the Great Recession. I helped build and diversify our economy. Just one of my bills created over 200 new businesses and over 3,000 new Montana products. So that's what we need in Washington.
Mr. Rosendale, welcome. Good evening. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about a somewhat related subject to health policy, healthcare policy. Now, you said you want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which provides protection against discrimination against people with pre-existing conditions, which has brought us Medicaid expansion, which covers 90,000 people in Montana, and also has assistance to people buying insurance on the individual market. Why is it a good idea to get rid of all that?
So, Mike, if we really look back to the reasons for repealing the ACA, it's because of the mandates that the government has come in and said, here's what you must buy, regardless of whether you need all of these particular items or not. And that's the 10 essential health benefits. What I wanted to make sure of is that we had a framework, though, so that people who needed those 10 essential benefits and had pre-existing conditions were actually able to go out and purchase a health plan for an affordable cost. And so, as you are very well familiar, you've covered for the legislative sessions, you've seen that I've been able to do that. We were able to develop a reinsurance program to provide a backup for the insurance companies, which means that the rates for everyone were able to be reduced by 15% covering pre-existing conditions, but then we brought on a multitude of other options for other people who did not want that extensive of a coverage to make sure that they could accommodate their needs in a high quality, affordable fashion. And that's before we even started talking about the work that we've done on reducing the cost of prescription drugs.
Thank you, Mr. Rosedale. Ms. Williams, your rebuttal.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on healthcare issues. I'm proud to have extended more coverage to Montanans by supporting Medicaid expansion, which my opponent voted against. And really, I think what's really important for Montanans to know is that Commissioner Rosendale, in a pandemic, has been promoting these short-term risky healthcare plans that right after, the people that sell those donated to his campaign. So those are risky. They don't have to cover those conditions, and it's not good for Montana.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendale, your response.
Now, my opponent continues to repeat false statements. It doesn't make them true just because people hear them more often. The record shows, and Mike, again, you've covered this, that we were able to cover pre-existing conditions. We were able to lower premiums by 15%. We've authorized direct primary care facilities, which people are raving about, that they've entered into those agreements with different facilities around the state, and have a multitude of other options that people are able to accommodate their health care.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Let's stick with the same topic. Ms. Williams, you have said regarding healthcare that you support allowing people 55 and over to buy into Medicare. My question is, how would you pay for that? Some of the critics of Medicare for All, some of that strategy feel that puts the whole Medicare program at risk financially. Your response?
Yeah, so they would be buying in. So it would mostly be folks that are currently on the individual market. As I travel Montana and talk to Montanans, many of them are trying to pay $1,900 a month in premiums with a $9,000 deductible. And that's just crazy. That's a third job. That's bankruptcy potential. So we absolutely need to fix the system. If we allow people 55 and older to buy in, it's going to lower the costs on the Medicare pool, and it's going to lower costs in the insurance market because you're taking that sector and you're moving it. I also want to be able to bargain for drug prices in Medicare. That's supposed to save $11 billion a year, which we can certainly use in better ways to help people get health care. So, it's a choice as well. So I think we can pass that. I think it's going to help us fix this patchwork of a system. And I think it's a practical approach.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Rosendale, your response.
We hear this common thread with most of my opponent's solutions, unfortunately, and that is, let's turn more over to the federal government. They have a better idea of how to resolve this. The fact of the matter is that if we start shifting all of our healthcare over to a government-style system, government-run system, that the cost gets shifted to the private sector. And what it will do is drive up costs, it will lower the quality, and jeopardize the very opening of our 49 rural hospitals across the state. They cannot continue to have more people paying less.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Ms. Williams, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so, I am running for a government position, so I do talk about things related to government. And this is actually a choice, which is what my opponent keeps talking about, is choice in healthcare. So we got to be consistent. We need to make sure that Montanans have access to quality, affordable healthcare. And I want to work on that. I worked on that in the legislature. One of my bills forced insurers to stop denying routine cancer care, and that is saving lives. I worked on surprise medical bills and much more. So that's the kind of leader we need.
Thank you. This next question goes to Mr. Rosendale. It was 6 years ago you were advocating for the transferring of federal lands to the state, but now you're against it, very bold type on your campaign website. How come this change of heart, and what does it say about your dedication to preserving public lands and their access in Montana?
Sure. Thank you very much for that question, Jill. I went around the state and I talked to the people across the state of Montana, and they made it very clear to me that they did not support the transfer of federal public lands to the state public land system. And so I honor that. That's what a representative is supposed to do. Go out, talk to your constituents, and then implement their their wishes. I think that clearly my work on the land board has demonstrated not only do I understand that, but I know how to implement it. We've been able to expand access to 45,000 acres of additional public lands. Most recently, we just opened up the north end of the Crazy Mountains to public access, which has been denied for 100 years. But in addition to opening that access, we've been able to protect areas that are environmentally sensitive. And we've also been able to utilize the great resources that we have on those state public lands in the way of harvesting millions of board feet of timber and managing the agricultural leases that are on those properties as well. So we've got the good balance.
Ms. Williams, your response.
Yeah, so my opponent based his advocating for public land transfer on the Constitution. The Constitution hasn't changed, but I know that when you come from Maryland, there's not a lot of public land there, so it takes some learning to figure out what our values here are in Montana. I've worked in this sector for 37 years, balancing the needs of our communities and our economy with the health of our forests and our rivers and our watersheds, and we need someone in Congress that doesn't have to be on a learning curve.
Mr. Rosendale, your response.
Again, I just point to my record on the land board. I basically helped negotiate several of the purchases that we even were able to conduct. Heck, we had in this last year one of the largest purchases of land for public use that the land board's history has ever conducted. And I was able to bring our groups together like the Stock Growers and the Farm Bureau to support that initially they were opposed to it, to make sure that, again, we could expand public access and manage those resources properly.
Ms. Williams, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
My question is about gun policy. Your opponent notes that you have an F rating from the National Rifle Association, the NRA, and says you're for gun control. I'm just wondering if you tell us, are there any changes in terms of regulation of gun ownership or purchases that you're in favor of?
Well, thanks for the question, and I hope all Montanans by now know that I'm a gun owner. I support the Second Amendment. I'm a hunter, but you know, I'm not going to let any organization tell me what I can or can't talk about with Montanans. And after the Parkland shooting, I was willing to have a conversation, and if they give me an F for that, you know, that's okay. If the NRA were what the NRA used to be, which was about habitat and firearm safety, I think I'd have an A. I've got 9 guns in the back room in the safe. So, you know, I support the Second Amendment. I'm ready to go defend it. And all this rhetoric about me trying to take people's guns away, why would I do that? I got enough of my own.
Mr. Rosendale, your rebuttal.
You can't say that she just has an F from the NRA. Ms. Williams said she was proud of having an F from the NRA. She has said at a minimal that she would eliminate semi-automatic weapons. The question isn't about how many guns you have in your cupboard or what types they are. It's that me as an individual is supposed to have that choice, not the government. And that's why I've also received not only an A from the NRA, but I've received an A from the Montana Shooting Sports Association as well. So while she would like to just make reference to the Washington groups, it's our local groups too.
Ms. Williams, your response, and also just to add, in that first question I asked, I was asking what your positions are in terms of any changes in gun ownership laws or gun purchasing laws. Yeah,
so I would support closing some loopholes in the background checks, internet, online. Many Americans support those, but I also want to point to the fact that my opponent wants no restrictions on guns. We already have restrictions on guns. So if you want no restrictions on guns, that means machine guns are out on the streets. I can't imagine law enforcement wants that. And terrorists, he you know, has no interest in controlling whether folks on the terrorist watch list can get guns.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We're going to switch topics slightly to police reform. Mr. Rosendale, you claim Ms. Williams favors defunding the police. Our question is, when has she ever said that? And does that mean you think the people that are out protesting across the nation don't have legitimate grievances against the police?
I have 3 of my brother-in-laws that are retired policemen. And I can tell you something, they've seen some of the actions that have taken place across our country by bad police, and they've condemned them, as we all have, but they've also seen action taking place across the country where people are not honoring or utilizing their First Amendment right to free speech, but they're actually just tearing down buildings and destroying private property. And I've come out from the very beginning and said that I back the bill. I back our police and law enforcement, because we are a country of law and order, and we have to maintain law and order. And the whole time that I've been proclaiming that, my opponent has sat silently. So while she's maybe not come out and called for defunding the police, she has sat silently by while groups that are funding her campaign are calling to defund the police.
Ms. Williams, your response.
I have never said I wanted to defund the police. That's politics. That's what Montanans and Americans can't stand, is these baseless accusations and the partisanship and the flinging of talking points. So I support law and order. I support people being able to protest, but if it goes into property damage or looting, those are crimes. People should be arrested and prosecuted. I made a statement in June that is still up on the KPAX website about this topic, and it's still there, so I haven't been silent.
Mr. Rosendale, your 30-second response.
Again, she's been silent on this issue when I've been out in front of this from the very beginning. We've got Bozeman, we have Missoula, and we have Helena making proposals to defund our police, and I've been opposed to this very vocally since they even brought it up. And my opponent has been silent on these issues at the same time that she's being funded. Her campaign is being funded by the same groups that are calling to defund our police. So you can't have it both ways.
All right, we're switching topics. We're going to talk about immigration, and this question goes to Kathleen Williams. Your opponent has accused you of being against border security and the wall in 4 sanctuary cities. So first off, is that correct? And if not, what is your plan for immigration policy and border security in this country?
Yeah, once again, those are political, partisan talking points. I have always said, and if you did any research, you would find this, that we need a strong border on the south that protects against illegal trafficking of humans, weapons, and drugs. We need a combination of physical barriers, surveillance, and boots on the ground to ensure that we have that we keep Americans safe and that we have a strong border. I have also said we need some compassion in our immigration system, and that Congress needs to wade in and solve these issues rather than dancing around complex issues, whether it's healthcare, immigration, or beyond. Congress is just broken. Everyone is in their partisan corners, and we need to send people to Congress that know how to work with people of all political stripes, that are not afraid of wading into difficult issues, and that are going to be an independent voice, not just parroting party and funder talking points. And I'll be that representative.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendale, you have 30 seconds.
So that sounds nice, and I would like to secure the border as well, but you can't talk about securing the border but then be supporting the problems that are created when you don't seal the border. And my opponent does support amnesty. She does support sanctuary cities, and when you are continuing to support the byproduct of having a porous border, that is just as bad as supporting the porous border. And we know that contributes to the human trafficking, and it contributes to the drug problems. And you can talk to law enforcement across this state, and they will agree.
Ms. Williams, your response.
Well, again, I don't know what amnesty, that's such a term that's thrown around. I do support allowing citizenship or paths to citizenship for the DACA kids. I don't think that's radical. I want to go back to another topic and back to public lands, and note that my opponent voted to put a cap on all the public land that the state could purchase. So no more additions to the public lands that the state, 45,000 acres, have very limited public access. So we need to hold him accountable on those statements.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosendale, let's switch topics. Let's talk a little bit about tax policy. Of course, you supported the 2017 federal tax cut bill supported by President Trump and Republicans. And I believe you said you wanted to make those cuts permanent. What I'm wondering is, this has created a huge federal deficit. You've presented yourself as the fiscally responsible candidate. How are we going to pay for all this debt that's being created by these giant tax cuts and other actions of Congress?
Good question, Mike. And I do believe we should make those provisions permanent, because when we start talking about trying to grow our economy and bring it back to life again after this coronavirus situation, these are some of the things we're going to have to do. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, my opponent wants to go in and immediately eliminate that when she arrives in Washington, which would basically be a tax increase of $2,000 to $3,000 per family across the state. It would tax our farmers and ranchers on their major equipment purchases, where they were able to expense those large purchases out right now. So we do need, and if you look at the revenue that was generated because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it far increased what they were pushing out as far as a tax reduction. These are dollars that we're allowing people to keep. This is not a gift from the government. I think that is really the first thing we have to recognize.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, your rebuttal.
Yeah, I have not said that I would repeal the 2017 revenue giveaway, as I call it. I've criticized it. I don't think we needed to do deficit spending when the economy was recovering to the tune of 1.9 trillion. That debt is going to get passed down to our kids and grandkids, and that's not fair. We got to do something about it. My opponent's plan, he talks about his economic plan, would really involve likely cuts to Medicare and Social Security, and we couldn't be doing job relief and economic relief. So it's so short-sighted.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendale, your response.
I just don't understand why my opponent continues to call this a revenue giveaway when it is our tax dollars that we are just keeping more of. And I personally believe that the people across this state can spend their money better than Ms. Williams can. I mean, it really is that simple. And if we're going to stimulate the economy, we absolutely cannot do it by piling on additional taxes and additional regulation. So she continues to provide the same solution, which is there's more government necessary in order for us to solve this.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Ms. Williams, drilling down just a little bit on this tax policy question. Again, you said you've opposed the Republican 27 federal tax cut bill. So our question is, does that mean you want to repeal it? You want to change it in some way? Can you be more specific?
Yeah, and I thank you for clarifying that, because criticizing it isn't openly saying I want to repeal it. I don't think that 83% of the benefit of that in one of the projected years should go to the top 1%. As they were negotiating that bill, they called the middle class people that make up to $400,000. That's not the middle class. The middle class here in Montana is up to 57,000 or so. I think we need tax policy that isn't done in a short-sighted, rushed way, that is targeted. And just like when I was on the tax committee in the legislature, I vice-chaired it in 2015. I lowered taxes on small businesses. We created a tax tool for low-income folks that was extremely targeted and one of the most effective tools in the nation. So we need to make sure we're not just parroting talking points, but that we send people there that know what they're doing when it comes to taxes.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Rosendale, your rebuttal.
I just looked to history that Ms. Williams is trying to rewrite. What she voted to oppose was $1 billion worth of tax relief for the people across this state while she was serving in the state legislature. She was not a champion for reducing taxes, I will tell you. I did vote to reduce the taxes and was able to do so. I reduced the operating expenses in my office by 23% to make sure that we could take that revenue and direct it back in to the state legislature so that hopefully they could use it to provide additional tax relief to our taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Ms. Williams, your final 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, well, when everyone has their own tax reduction bill and they're not coordinated, and nobody seems to be able to figure out what a good plan is going to be until very late in the session, which I did support. Yeah, if you want to add those all up, it's just a lot of unwise, unthought out policies that were really going to benefit the wealthy. That's what those were. So I want fair, equitable policy that ensures we do keep funds in Montana's lower and middle income folks. Yeah, let's reduce those.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. This next question is for Mr. Rosendale. You support President Trump. I see you have a picture of the two of you behind you in your office there. If you win, you'd obviously be representing Montana. Is there an issue that you might disagree with the president on that you would have to advocate for Montana? So I guess I'm asking, can you legislate independently of him and his policies?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, Jill. And I will tell you that I will represent the people of Montana first. That is who is electing me and who is sending me to serve in the United States Congress. I think that what I bring to the table is the conversation about supporting our agricultural community. That's why the Farm Bureau has endorsed me. The Montana Farm Bureau has endorsed me. They understand that I understand the agricultural community. It is the backbone of our state. And to be able to have that conversation with the president, it's not where we disagree. It's having someone who has a relationship with the president that's going to advance the policies that are in the best interest of our state. And whether that's trade negotiations or whether that's making sure that we don't overburden them with some of the regulations that my opponent would place upon them through the Green New Deal or whatever, to make sure that I've got the president's ear, he's got my back, and I think that's what people are looking for.
All right, thank you. Ms. Williams, of course, this question does sort of depend on if the president wins re-election, but your response.
I absolutely will legislate independently. I'll work with whomever is in the president's seat, but what my opponent needs to be reminded of is that Congress is an independent branch of government, and I am all over helping our agricultural sector. I've worked with farmers and ranchers for much of my career. My opponent had an opportunity to address farmers and ranchers in a forum that I just participated in a couple days ago. And twice he has refused to show up. So I'm all about representing all of Montana and doing it in an independent way.
Mr. Rosendale, 30 seconds.
Unfortunately, the policies that she produces, my opponent produces, while she says she's representing our businesses, mainly the agricultural community, fall very short. While we both served in the legislature together, Ms. Williams was receiving not only the F from the NRA and the F from the Montana Shooting Sports Association, but an F from the Montana Chamber of Commerce as well. And again, that's why when we start looking at who's bringing forward good policies to help our state, these groups have all endorsed me, including the Farm Bureau, who has endorsed me as well.
Ms. Williams, let's talk a little bit about forest policy and lands policy, with which you're very familiar. Mr. Rosendale said we need to be able to better manage our forests, which means allowing logging when necessary, and perhaps stopping some of the lawsuits that are halting these projects. Do you agree with that or not? And if not, why not?
Well, I do think we need to manage our forests carefully and in a science-based manner. I've worked, again, 37 years, almost 4 decades in natural resources with a specialty in water, and I know what's important for watersheds. And my opponent seems to think that if we just cut all the trees down, there won't ever be any forest fires. And it's much more complex than that. And again, we need to send someone to Congress that understands these issues, that knows the missions of the agencies, that can ensure that we are managing them correctly. We need to employ all kinds of tools, including mechanical vegetation removal, logging, and keep our infrastructure of our timber industry intact. So, but we also need prescribed burns. We need to work with landowners to create defensible space. We need to have a much more layered approach than just talking points.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendale, your response.
I went to a sawmill in St. Regis several months ago, and we were standing in the middle of national forest, and they were bringing their logs in from Utah and from Wyoming. And that is absolutely astonishing to me. We have all this timber, it needs to be harvested, and we have to stop the radical environmentalists from keeping us from utilizing the resources that we have here. Absolutely, it has to be managed properly, and we've demonstrated again with my work on the land board, we know how to do that.
Ms. Williams, your response if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. So I have supported and encouraged and helped some of these forest collaborative planning processes that once they get a plan in place, then that can be implemented and the harvesting can occur. I've supported, harvesting a harvest plan in our watershed to try and ensure that we don't have a big slug of sediment that comes down into our water supply with a catastrophic fire. So I support good management, and we need to have people with experience in these areas to ensure that we move those forward.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I'm going to switch topics now to Mr. Rosendale on the topic of mail ballots. Do you support the Republican allegations of widespread fraud with those mail ballots? The Trump campaign right now is suing the state of Montana over the governor's directive giving local election officials the authority to conduct this election by mail. Do you support that lawsuit? How should we be voting during a pandemic?
So I think we demonstrated the ability to conduct an election properly during the primary, and I would defer to the election superintendents and the clerks to make sure that it's managed properly. I have talked to several of them lately, and I feel much more comfortable about the process. The signature check that they have in place to make sure that as the ballots come in, that they're being produced by the person who it was assigned to. And I think that it's up to us as candidates now to go out and make sure that we get every vote that we can, every voter that we can, talk to the public and tell them our story and make sure that we can gain that support. That's what elections are about. I've been able to travel around the state over the last 30 days now that folks are feeling a little bit more comfortable about it and getting face to face with the voters and answering them the tough questions. And I feel comfortable that we are headed in the right direction.
So just to follow up quickly, do you feel it's a frivolous lawsuit then, or do you back the lawsuit against the state and its all mail ballot?
I think the lawsuits are really just trying to make sure that they keep the integrity of the election in place, and the voters and the outcome of that has to have the support of the people that are placing the votes. And I really believe that that's what they're trying to do. And as we go through again and talk to the clerks and we talk to the folks that are conducting the election, if they are comfortable with it, then I have to rely upon them. They're the ones that we have put in place to manage these elections, and so I would defer to them.
Ms. Williams, your response.
Well, I think we may be on a similar page here. I think our local elections have been reliable. We need to ensure that anyone trying to cast doubt on that is not listened to, and we need people to vote early, vote however they feel safe, whether it's in person or by mail ballot. And since we do agree, I'll use the last couple seconds to talk about partisanship and the fact that my opponent supported a bill that would have increased the campaign limits by up to 800% for parties and 400% for individuals. And we don't need that.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendale, you wrap things up for 30 seconds.
Sure. I find it fascinating that my opponent just brought in the campaign funding formulas that people are considering now, as she's looking to use your taxpayers' dollars to support $5 million of her campaign, while at the same time, her campaign is paying her a salary. So your taxpayers' dollars would be paying for her campaign to pay her a salary. And so it's astonishing.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. This next question is to Kathleen Williams, and we're going to touch on the Supreme Court here a little bit. So let's say you're elected and then the Democrats take control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Would you support adding additional Supreme Court judges if President Trump is able to confirm a 6th Supreme Court judge before the election?
For me, the jury is out on that. I need to hear the arguments from both sides. Some have said that the Supreme Court isn't sufficiently representative of the nation. I want to make sure, what I'm concerned about is the politicization of the Supreme Court, and that really doesn't have anything to do with, adding to or not. It used to be the backstop against partisanship, and now the Supreme Court that's at risk. So we need to make sure that we continue to evaluate justices on their background, on their willingness to support precedent, and their abilities. And I wish we could get back to the day where people like Sandra Day O'Connor were, voted unanimously, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 86%. So we need to make sure that the court functions as the way it was intended and isn't politicized.
Mr. Rosendale, 30 seconds.
First, I'd like to say that Justice Ginsburg was a historic figure and that she inspired women across our country. And at this time, Jean and I would like to send our thoughts and prayers out to her family. Again, what you do hear, though, from my opponent is political double talk. She won't give you a straight answer about stacking the courts. The courts have had 9 figures on there for 150 years. And because they haven't been able to get their way, the Democratic Party, and yes, I'm sorry, it's the Democratic Party, wants to stack the court.
Ms. Williams.
Well, I've never taken marching orders from the party, so I will continue to evaluate in an independent way my voting and what I advocate for based on Montana's interests. I want to go back to an accusation he made. Yeah, I do take a small salary from my campaign. It's not taxpayer dollars, just like Vice President Pence did when he ran for Congress. So I'm not a wealthy millionaire. I need to be able to support myself to be able to run. I put aside a successful career to do this, and the little salary helps.
Thank you.
Mr. Rosendale, the next question goes to you. You've talked about, and your opponent has also talked about, the need to expand and improve internet and cell phone service in rural Montana. So how are we going to do it? And if you're elected, what exactly are you proposing? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to accomplish it?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mike. First of all, to expand broadband into our rural communities, it is very critical, not only for the education so that we can have a more equal distribution of education that can compete with the more urban areas that we have around the state, but also to help our farmers and ranchers when they start trying to market their goods and purchase products to help them do their business. But the way to do this is, there's several things. Number one, we can reduce the fees. Let's reduce the fees so that it's easier for these folks to expand into the communities. Number two, reduce some of the regulations. There's an awful lot of red tape that is unnecessary at the federal level that is prohibiting our broadband from expanding out into the rural areas. Number three, no one likes driving on construction zones. And so why don't we, while we have roadways open and construction taking place, actually allow these communications firms to go in and start placing the equipment in that they need at that time, so we don't have to go back in and rip up good infrastructure.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Your rebuttal, you've talked about this issue as well.
I have. I've been working on broadband issues for quite a while. In the legislature, we were trying to figure out how to expand broadband, and we found that we couldn't even get maps of where it is and where it isn't. So luckily, there's been a bill passed in Congress that makes mapping more available, and we need to ensure that we expand broadband. It's infrastructure. I mean, my opponent voted against infrastructure bills in the legislature. This is infrastructure. It needs a commitment from the federal zone to really help. And I don't think reduced fees is going to get us the coverage that we need. Even though it's great. I mean, it's a great part.
Mr. Rosendale, your response.
Infrastructure investment is absolutely critical. And as soon as I served my first session in the legislature, I organized a bus trip for 35 legislators to come around the state and see some of the places that we were having failures, and so that they could recognize the proper investment that would allow us to expand the economy into the private sector and develop jobs and grow the economy. And basically, when we came in the 2013 session, I was able to push legislation forward for infrastructure that was passed by nearly 100% of the bodies.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Ms. Williams, this question directed to you regarding our natural resources. Montana, of course, very rich in natural resources. Much has been made about the Green New Deal. Why shouldn't Montana try to develop as many of our natural resources as possible? Oil, gas, coal, hard rock mining. How does all that fit into your energy policy?
Well, first of all, I have not been an advocate of the Green New Deal as written, and I recognize the resources that we have in Montana. We have great opportunities. What I talk about is making sure that we're ready for the energy consumers of the future. The markets and the demands of we're an energy exporting state, so the markets have had an effect on our coal marketability and our fossil fuels, and the people we market to are demanding energy that's affordable and from more renewable sources. So let's get ready and be ahead of those energy consumers of the future and make sure that we've got the workforce and the economy that's ready to serve them. So I'm all about turning things into opportunities and ensuring that we do as much as we can with the resources that we've got in a clean way.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Rosendale, your response.
Again, we hear political double talk from my opponent. She does not support the Green New Deal as written, quote, as written. She supports provisions of the new Green Deal, and she doesn't want to come out and tell us which ones because she knows that the people across our state don't support the Green New Deal. What we've demonstrated while serving on the land board is that we know how to manage these resources properly. We've harvested millions of boards of timber, and we've also been able to protect environmentally sensitive areas to make sure that this pristine beauty isn't disturbed.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. Ms. Williams, your final 30 seconds.
Yeah. I do not support the Green New Deal. How about that? We need to get ahead of the economy and be part of the economy of the future. You know, there was an article in the paper of one of the investors in Colstrip power plant pulling out and going and investing in wind in Wyoming. We should not be losing investors to other states. We need to make sure that we're attracting them here. And if that's the economy of the future, let's get ahead of it and capitalize on it.
All right. Thank you. My next question goes to Mr. Rosendale. When I drive home at night for the last few nights, I've seen a family living in their van near the station. And I don't know their story, but it makes me think about some of the wealth inequality we have in this country. Is there anything that you would do to help more Americans be financially secure, not to be wealthy, but just to be able to have a home and even maybe save for their kids' college education down the road?
Sure, Jill. And I will tell you, this goes directly to my 8-point plan that we've been working on. We have to grow the economy. And if the economy grows, everyone gets to take advantage of it. The folks continue to expand their businesses. They hire more people. As more people get hired, you have more competition for jobs. When the Bakken oil boom was at its full strength in eastern Montana, the wages went from about $12 an hour up to $17.50 an hour because the demand for employment was so great. And so that is why I brought forward, after meeting with our business leaders from across the state and talked to them about what we needed to do. That is where we need to focus. We also need to focus on affordable housing, and we cannot continue to pile on regulations on the folks that are building homes across the state of Montana and think that that is going to help us to develop affordable housing for people.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Yeah, well, those are difficult scenes to see, and we absolutely need to help people be able to craft and achieve their American dream. You know, we need to lower healthcare costs. I'm all over that. We need to build on Montana's strengths. Again, as I helped Montana get out of a crisis, created over 200 new businesses, created a new type of corporation in Montana, worked with the private sector to ensure we could advance innovation. You know, that's what we need, is someone in government who can focus on the private sector and help get out of the way when we need to, and help them move forward with good ideas.
Mr. Rosendale, your 30 seconds.
Again, I've put forward my plan. We need to grow the economy, in contrast to my opponent, who has voted for opposition to $1 billion worth of tax relief that we could provide to people across this entire state. When you say that you're going to oppose the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and take $2,000 to $3,000 a year from every family across our state, that is not going to help these exact people that are struggling and trying to make ends meet.
This question goes to Ms. Williams. This will be the final question of our debate this evening. Ms. Williams, we talked about President Trump earlier and his support of Mr. Rosendale and vice versa. I'm assuming that you're voting for Mr. Biden for president. Tell us why you're supporting Mr. Biden for president.
Well, I'm voting for whoever is going to be the best for Montana. And I think we need to have someone that is a uniter, not a divider, that can bring this country together, like you know, we witnessed when the Twin Towers fell. The president then really called for unification and working together. So I think that's what we need. I'm going to vote accordingly. And I, you know, I look forward to having someone in the office that I can work with, no matter who it is. I look forward to working with the president, but ensuring that Montana has the independent voice and a strong legislator that can help rebuild Congress and cut through the hyperpartisanship and work with the Senate and the president, no matter who it is.
Mr. Rosendale, you have a response.
It's nice to say that, but as clearly demonstrated by her work in the legislature, unfortunately, Ms. Williams was one of the most partisan members that served in Congress. I mean, she in the legislature, excuse me. Quite frankly, she opposed $1 billion worth of tax relief for the people across the state, and she piled up regulations on her businesses, and that is not trying to bring people together so that we can serve the entire community.
Ms. Williams, your response, and you're not going to tell us who you're voting for president?
I think everyone's vote is their business, and I want Montanans to feel like they have every opportunity to vote for who they want. And frankly, I'm really offended that my opponent is calling me partisan, because I was nonpartisan legislative staff. I loved that role. I proposed a bill that would have turned the legislature nonpartisan, like Nebraska. I went against my party to keep the campaign limits low. I fought on the Rules Committee against my leader, or well, what he'd already agreed to ensure that we had bipartisan leadership on committees. So that's why I'm running, is because of the hyperpartisanship out there, and I'm gonna help fix it.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and thank you, Mr. Rosendale. We've come to the part of our debate where each candidate has 90 seconds for a closing statement. And Ms. Williams, you get to go first.
Well, thank you. Thank you to every Montanan who turned into this debate. It's so important to see your candidates. I'm in this race because Montanans deserve a true independent voice who will deliver for them, for you in Congress, and not just focus on special interests. People are frustrated with Washington because every issue turns into a partisan political fight. Congress is broken. My opponent would be more of the same. He wants to dismantle protections for people with pre-existing conditions. He rubber stamped a 23% increase in insurance premiums after he took campaign contributions from insurers. He said he wanted to transfer public lands. He spent 70% of his time as insurance commissioner running for another office on your dime, Montana. He voted against veterans' homes, against Purple Heart recipients, against Gold Star families. Enough with the partisanship and the politicians who are out of touch with our values. I'm ready to get more people health care while maintaining your choice of insurance. I want to make sure everyone can craft and achieve their American dream. I want to protect our incredible outdoor heritage, and I will stand up for veterans, our service members, and their families. My opponent has shown he won't do that. He'll put his own interests and his donors first. We're facing challenging times. Who we send to Congress matters. My commitment to you is I will show up and deliver, something I've done my entire career. I'd be honored to have your vote and to be your next Congresswoman.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Rosendale, your final statement, closing statement.
First, I'd like to thank everybody with MTN for putting this on so that the communities can see exactly the differences between us. And next, I'd like to thank my wife, Jean. She is always by my side for 5 years now, and she is my rock and helps me through every day. Montanans have a clear choice in who is going to represent us in the next Congress. I keep my word and will get results for people across the entire state, all people across the state. My opponent is going to work for Nancy Pelosi and the radical far leftists who fund her campaign. I will defend our Second Amendment rights, and my opponent has made it clear that she will strip away your guns and undermine your Second Amendment rights. I have a strong record of providing affordable, high-quality health care that covers pre-existing conditions. My opponent wants a Bernie Sanders-style, government-run healthcare system that is going to treat you like a number instead of an individual. I'll fight to lower taxes, streamline regulations, and help our economy get growing again. My opponent wants to raise your taxes, has already voted against $1 billion worth of tax relief for the people across this state, and wants to use your taxes to fund her campaign, which she currently uses to pay her salary. Montanans deserve better than that. They deserve better than the far left California style agenda that my opponent is bringing forward. Her colleagues at Berkeley University may have thought that taking your guns and raising your taxes was a good idea, but the people across the state of Montana don't. Montana is the last best place.
Time is up, Mr. Rosendale.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our debate for the U.S. House tonight. We'd like to thank both our candidates, Kathleen Williams and Matt Rosendale, for participating. Coverage of this race, however, doesn't stop here. In just 5 minutes, we invite you to join us on your local MTN station Facebook page for a Facebook Live event. We're going to break down this debate along with political scientist David Parker from MSU and Jeremy Johnson from Carroll College. He'll be joining Mike Dennison, our chief political reporter, and myself. Again, Facebook Live in just 5 minutes to analyze this debate. So we thank you all for joining us. This concludes our coverage of the U.S. House debate. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, exercise your right to vote.
Next week, Republican Greg Gianforte and Democrat Mike Cooney meet when MTN News presents The Race for Montana Governor, Saturday night at 6 on your local MTN station.